Good afternoon. Welcome to the Board of Commissioners' regular workshop meeting. Today is Wednesday, June the 24th, 2026. It is 4 p.m. City Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Brooks.
Here.
Vice Mayor McGinn.
Here.
Commissioner Taglerini.
Here.
Commissioner Dillon.
Here.
Commissioner Gabai.
Here.
All are present.
We have no public in attendance for public comments, so we will move on to our first item, presentation, 2026 Legislative Update by R.J. Myers with Myers Consulting Group.
Is it okay if I close this? Can I close this? Okay. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you so much for letting me join you guys tonight. I'm just going to provide a wrap-up, and I'll do this every year. I know we said that in September, October, when we were all talking, that I would do a wrap-up. We would do a pre-session like outlook, and so really just today I'm going to talk about just a couple of things, give a high-level bird's eye view of really where the budget stands right now. Just a quick breakdown of the spending by category, so you know how your tax dollars are being spent. We're going to talk about our budget requests, their appropriation that we're requesting, and as well as, sorry, and I'm going to turn this off. This is like already driving me crazy. People texting me. Sorry. Some of the bills that passed, I'm not sure if you were reading the tracker that I was sending over during session. I'm just going to highlight a few items if you were not able to look that over. And then I want to discuss finally we've had a number of special sessions, but how some of the special sessions are going to impact Madeira Beach. Then I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm going to stick around throughout the meeting, so I'll be here afterward if you'd like to chat as well. But I'll get right to it. So the 2026 legislative session, they have adjourned. The legislature has one requirement, and it is to pass a balanced budget every single year. So this year, legislators, they left Tallahassee with a just under a $114.4 billion budget. Of that $114.4 billion, the legislature spent $13.2 billion on transportation. That money primarily goes to the Department of Transportation and funds things like our seaports, airports, general infrastructure projects. Our road project that we requested is going to come from that pot of funds. $49.2 billion for our healthcare budget. This is the largest chunk that is spent every single year. That money goes to the Department of Health, Agency for Healthcare Administration, Agency for Persons with Disabilities. Really, any agencies that touch Medicaid dollars. Those are the agencies that receive that money. $31.9 billion for education. That one's pretty obvious. It goes to the Department of Education, so it funds K through 12 scholarships, teacher salaries. $7.2 billion for our criminal justice budget. That is for things like the Department of Corrections, juvenile justice, state attorney's offices, public defender's offices, our courts. $19.1 billion for agriculture. This is where, when we request stormwater, wastewater projects, this is where those projects come from. That money also goes to the Department of Agriculture, Environmental Protection, and Fish and Wildlife. And then $5.9 billion was spent on our general government budget. That is the cost to run your state government, public salaried employees, the Department of State, and otherwise is a pretty lean budget for a statewide budget. So I mentioned the Department of Transportation and the road project. We did submit a request so we could finish the Area 6 project. I submitted a request for $1 million, and that was fully funded. I have spoken with the governor's office multiple times, and I know that Senator DeSegli and Representative Cheney have also followed up on that project. The governor was sent the budget yesterday around shortly afternoon. He will have until next Tuesday at 11:59 to sign it and issue his veto letter. So I'll keep you all apprised as that moves along and let you know where we're at with that. As some of the legislation goes, every year, I will, Chief and I talked about this during session, but I believe that each of you should have received the Excel document with all the policy items that I was tracking for the city that may have an impact to Madeira Beach. I think I made a note right at the end of session that this would turn out to be one of the maybe least productive sessions in terms of policy. And that was about 2 weeks out. And then the legislature turned it around, and I think that we ended with about 240 bills total. But we did track a few dozen bills from Madeira Beach. In the end, there were only a handful that were certified, enrolled, and transmitted to the governor. But just a few that I wanted to highlight for you. HB 1217 related to the ban on local net zero policies. This was by Representative Snyder. So 2 years ago, Governor DeSantis signed legislation declaring that the state would no longer consider climate change when crafting energy policy. HB 1217 really exists to bring cities into conformity with that idea, and just basically says that local governments cannot enact or enforce any net zero policies by resolution, ordinance, rule, code, and that you could not spend any funds that would implement or advance net zero policies. HB 399 by Representative Barrero. This is related to land use and development regulation. So this bill requires that, it requires development permit application fees to reasonably relate to actual associated costs, and really it limits local government's flexibility when fee setting was the intention. So local government, so Madeira Beach may have to audit and potentially revise your fee structures to comply with the new law, HB 399. And then this one, I know that I've met with most of you in one-on-ones, and we've talked, and this has come up. So this has been sent to the governor, HB 1329, relating to local government finances by Representative Benaroche. So this bill revises the time frame for posting tentative and final budgets on your websites, and really the idea is that that it was tightening public transparency deadlines. So this bill is going to require Madeira Beach and all local governments to hold a budget workshop by a specified date, and to perform a budget reduction exercise that demonstrates a 10% cut to your annual budget. You'll have to do this every single year going forward, and it will have to be posted on your website. Moving on, the special sessions that we mentioned, the legislature had 6 special sessions this year. The 5th special session was related to congressional redistricting. So the legislature did redraw the congressional maps, as we all saw. The impact to Madeira Beach, if you do not know, is that the newly drawn congressional district, CD 16, I believe the northern border on the Barrier Islands is, I think it's Indian Rocks, but it goes down to Tierra Verde, and it's going to go east and take in Manatee, Hardy, and DeSoto counties. The reason why that is a big deal to a beach community in an urbanized area is that it will lump you in with a more rural district. Moving on from that, the thing that I know you all want to know about, and we have discussed, the legislature did meet a few weeks ago for their 6th special session for the purpose of passing a joint resolution that would provide voters the opportunity to eliminate property taxes this November. If it is approved by 60% of voters, non-school property taxes would be exempt from the first $150K beginning in 2027, $250K in 2028, and then indexed for inflation in 2029. Another piece of this bill that is, I don't see folks talking about a lot, but it is in there. But it basically, if it does pass, there's language in the bill that would provide the legislature the authority to implement a full exemption by general law. And so they could pass a bill, and it would completely eliminate property taxes. And so if this does pass in November, I would bet your bottom dollar that they're going to make an attempt to do that in Tallahassee. Just a few items that I believe most of you know, but to highlight some other things in the bill. The ad valorem caps for non-homesteaded properties will be permanently lowered to 5% from 10% annually. The bill outlines the uses of ad valorem revenue for local governments and limits them to public safety, first responders, education funding, financing of infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, stormwater, natural resource projects, flood control measures, salaries and retirement of employees is obviously in there. The Revenue Estimating Conference on this bill said that the impact to local governments statewide would be $8.4 billion. I'm pretty sure I read just a few days ago that that number was a little bit higher even now, like as folks are starting to do their own analyses. And that's what I've got for right now. I know that is not ending on the happiest note, but I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Do we have any public comment? Commissioners, any comments or questions for RJ?
Pretty comprehensive report, thank you.
Can you say again what that date was that the governor has to either sign or veto?
So the governor has until next Tuesday, the
Next
last day of the
Tuesday.
month, it'll be at 11.
So he has to sign it or veto it, and was there any reason he would veto it?
Our project. So I will tell you, I've spoken to the governor's team. As of right now, I think we're okay. Obviously, I can't promise anything. Who knows what could happen? But I do know that Rep. Cheney, I spoke with her this morning about our project, and so I know that she is actively engaging them. And well, I mean, we'll know. I mean, if he doesn't sign it by 11:59, and I'm certain he will, it would automatically go into effect.
Oh,
So,
great. So if he does nothing,
if he does nothing, which I don't know if that's ever happened, but I'm not a historian, but maybe it has happened.
okay, thanks. Great.
Thank you, RJ. Very nice. Next on the agenda is Board of Commissioners salary increase discussion, and Jerry Cantrell with the Civil Service Commission, he is the chairman, is going to present this.
I gotta figure out how to get into this, so
Oh.
just a second. Okay. Is it this one? Yes. Timed out. There we go. Thank you. All right. All right. Good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Thank you for opportunity to speak with you today. You've also been provided, besides this presentation, with detailed supporting materials, including memorandum with data and comparative analysis. This presentation is intended to provide a clear framework to guide your discussion. My intent this evening is not to advocate for a specific outcome, but rather to provide a neutral, structured framework to support your discussion of commissioner and mayoral compensation. This approach is consistent with the materials provided and is intended to assist your deliberations in a clear and transparent way. Again, this is not a proposal. It is simply a framework for your discussion. Madeira Beach is a community of approximately 4,000 residents. However, the city operates within a high-intensity tourism environment serving millions of visitors annually. In practical terms, the city functions as a small municipality serving a much larger and highly variable population. This context shapes how each of the following factors is evaluated. With that context, the framework of the discussion becomes clear. All right, so this framework will be presented in the 5 categories, all right? Scope and complexity of responsibility, time commitment and public accountability, economic and operational demands, comparative and market context, and access to public service. So starting with scope and complexity, all right? The city operates within a $30 million annual expenditures in a broader financial scope of approximately $50 million every year. Right now, this year, $50 million, sorry. This includes oversight of public safety, infrastructure, and long-term policy direction. As reflected in the supporting materials, this level of responsibility aligns more closely with municipalities experiencing significantly larger operational demands. This represents responsibility for both daily operations and long-term strategy. For time commitment and public accountability, the roles extend beyond scheduled meetings to include policy review, constituent communications, and regional coordination. There is also continuous public accountability, including during emergencies. The workload can fluctuate significantly depending upon seasonal populations, changes, and peak tourism periods described in the memorandum. The materials included are an illustrative reference point for discussion purposes. This is not a recommendation or a preferred outcome. All right. It is intended only to provide tangible reference for your discussions. All right. Economic and operational advance. The city serves, as we already discussed, it serves approximately 4,000 residents and millions of visitors annually. This creates a high-demand operational environment in areas such as public safety, infrastructure, and regulation. Planning level analysis in the memorandum indicates that the visitor activity may be several hundred times the resident population on an annualized basis, placing Madeira Beach in a distinctively different operational category than most cities of similar size. Governance requires balancing residents' needs along with a large and variable visitor population. Comparative and market context. All right. Compensation varies across municipalities based on complexity and scale. Comparative data provides useful context, but should be considered as one of several factors. The comparative information provided in your material is intended to inform your discussion across peer municipalities, but not to determine a specific outcome. Access to service. Public service. Compensation levels may affect who is able to serve and the diversity of the participation in public service. This also relates to long-term governance sustainability, particularly given the workload and variability outlined in the supporting analysis. This relates to long-term sustainability and access to public service. Right? And in closing this, taken together, these factors illustrate that the responsibilities of elected service extends beyond the population size alone may suggest. The supporting data further reinforces that these responsibilities are influenced by tourism intensity and seasonal population dynamics, not solely resident population. My goal is simply to provide a structured way for you to evaluate this issue. Thank you for your time and your service to the community. You guys have questions? I provided you a lot of stuff, so.
Do we have any public comment? Commission?
Now, when would this take place? Like,
This would not take place. This is a discussion. Jerry brought this to us as a discussion. Now, this is a discussion for the board as to whether or not we,
discuss it?
correct.
Yes.
So ask him
So
any
I
questions.
believe that I'd look forward to hearing about the residents' opinion on this also.
I just, a couple questions and then a comment. What are the top three reasons we should even consider changing our compensation structure as we have it? I mean, based
It's
on.
really, that decision's ultimately up to you.
Sure, but
However, top
let's-
three that I could mention, if you look at market benchmarking versus comparable leadership roles, all right? Even acknowledging that public service is not a private sector work, and it's not, all right? The scale and responsibility in Madeira Beach aligns more closely with executive roles than the typical part-time governance, all right? Leaders responsible for a budget around 30 million, all right? They normally are compensated in the range of 150,000. That's like the low end.
So the amount of budget that we're responsible
Amount of budget
for.
responsible. It's also, you're not CEOs, you're Board of Commissioner members, and you still exercise fiduciary oversight over similar scale budgets and major capital decisions. So that's another aspect of it. The gap highlights that the current compensation may not reflect the level of responsibility or liability that the decisions that you're making are impacting. So that's number one. Would you like me to provide a second one? Okay, you want three, all right. Attracting and retaining qualified candidates. Compensation should not be a barrier to public service for qualified residents who bring valuable skills in governance. Competitive compensation helps ensure, one, that you have a broader, more diverse candidate pool. It also, individuals with financial, legal, and it brings in people that would have expertise with financial, legal, and infrastructure expertise. The low compensation itself can unintentionally limit service to retirees or independently wealthy individuals, all right? It may also discourage working professionals and younger candidates. The adjustments may help maintain a governing body that reflects the full community, all right? Not just those able to afford to serve, all right? Third, there's an increased workload and complexity of governance. The role today is substantially more complex than when the compensation levels were originally set. All right. Modern municipal governance includes regulatory compliance, disaster preparedness and recovery, it's especially relevant locally. All right. Infrastructure planning and federal state funding navigation, constituent demands for transparency and responsiveness. Many boards have seen their roles evolve from nominal oversight to high engagement governance requiring significant time commitment. All right. Pay levels haven't been revisited, maybe no longer reflected in the real world workload. So these are three major categories I can think of. Marketing benchmark versus comparable leadership roles, attracting and retaining qualified candidates, and increased workload and complexity of governance.
I see you have some cities here that we compare to. Is there one city in particular that I see Sandoval, Treasurer, on that is comparable to our city, but does compensate their board?
If you want to do one that's comparable, all right, one that's comparable in size, the closest I can think of is going to be Holmes Beach. All right, now that's down, I think it's Manatee County. It's just, I think it's Santa Maria. It's right below it, if I'm right. They have about 4,500 residents. Their annual budget is 25 to 35 million. Their tourism ratio is 200 to 1, based upon the data that I can get from the state and the counties. Their commissioners are paid $8,340 a year, and their mayor is paid $29,200 a year. They don't have the level of tourism as it's been laid out for what Madeira Beach is. So but it's the most comparable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have any other questions.
I thank you for all the effort and stuff that you did here. Excuse me. And it's something that I guess it's not that it's for us necessarily, but I look at this as for the future commissioners that are going to be here. And just like you said, you know, we all are doing it as a donation basically. But yet if we want good qualified people that can't really afford to take the time that it takes to do this, I think it's an excellent idea to at least open up the discussion and move it forward. And as to how exactly we'd look at moving it forward, I'm not sure. But thank you for all your time and effort.
So Jerry, thank you. You did put a lot of time and effort into it, and thank you for that. I would say, I do agree with Commissioner McGeehan. It would be interesting to see what the public's input would be on this. But for me personally, I view sitting here on the dais, the most important part of this is being a public servant. And I didn't run to be a commissioner. I served on the budget committee. I did not get paid. I showed up for every meeting. I served on the planning commission. I did not get paid. I showed up for every meeting. I sit here and serve on this commission, and I do not show up for the money. I serve on more than 5 other boards. I don't get paid a penny to go do it. I don't do it because I have to. I do it because I want to serve my community. And it is important to me that the people who sit up here aren't doing it for the money. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a discussion on money, but money should not be the reason that we come here. We did health insurance. It didn't get any more people to come and sit on the commission. So a couple of things that when I was going in and researching, our fellow communities don't make more than us. Most of them make less than us. And that's one of the things that I've heard from many other elected officials in Pinellas County on the small level like us, that we make more money and we add these benefits and they have to try to keep up. But my biggest thing is is this the right time to be talking about us making more money when we're looking at property tax going down? And a lot of this was focused on tourism, and the tourism doesn't directly reflect on us, but it should be noted that tourism activity creates operational demands, and I wrote this down so I would not mess it up, but those demands are primarily addressed through city staff, the city manager, department directors, consultants, and contractors. So when I read through all of this and was researching and reading, it really struck me that we shouldn't be sitting here talking about us making more money. We should be sitting here being more concerned about our employees and how we take care of them, because they are the ones who must be here. When a storm hits, there is no requirement for anyone sitting on this commission to show up the next day. If you can, you can. If you can't, you don't. There's not an expectation or a requirement. There is a requirement for the 80-plus employees that this city employs to show up the day after the storm. They are the ones that are responsible for the day-to-day activities. They are the ones that really hold this city together. We sit here and vote on policy and finances. So as much as I appreciate the conversation, I, at this time, am not interested in raising pay. I don't know how I answer to a resident that we voted to raise the pay for the commission when we have so many other projects going on. There's so much uncertainty, and we still have so many residents that aren't back in their homes, that are living in uncertainty. It seems like a ill-posed time for us to consider giving ourselves a lift in money. And that's how I feel. That's just my personal opinion, and I'm only one of 5.
Excuse me. I agree and concur, and truthfully, in terms of, I think as it was put, we're going to be putting this out to vote, that we're going to be going on for a longer term. So why don't we look at doing something, send it out to a vote, put it out. Simple thing is, you come November, are the residents looking to possibly give the commission, the board, a raise? I don't know that it has to be any more complicated than that. You know, and let the citizens vote. I mean, they could decide. And it's just, I believe, just one more thing on our potential ballot.
Well, I think it's definitely open for discussion. As we already talked about, I would like to see the residents' opinion on this. Commissioner Dillon, when he said this could be an investment into the future, but also, again, the mayor, and as you know, we've been up here since 2023, doing our due diligence. I believe that this is something that the residents can look at, and we can openly discuss again. So, Jerry, thank you very much for a great job on this context.
Thank you.
I'm open to further discussions.
So it occurs to me that maybe a survey monkey would be a good, to go off of Commissioner Dillon's want for the community. And I mean, I think we all sit here and want for input from the community. That might be a way to gauge how the community feels.
Well, I think Clara was about to say something, but I do believe if we would put it out for a vote, why prolong the discussion if the people don't want us to have a raise? So I would think that would be the first step, if we can put it out for a vote. If they say yes, then we discuss it further. If they all say no, then it's a done deal. I mean, you know, and not like we're in a hurry to get this done. So if it waits till November and either yay or nay, and then we bring it up further at that point.
So I said I was done with questions, but I do have some things to say. I was on the board when we voted in the insurance offering, and it's an optional, and I do know that it has been accepted by commissioners since that time, and I was very pleased that we made that. And my argument then is the same. My argument now is the same as my argument then. Currently, we have a very, I consider, cohesive and productive board. in my 30 years in this city, this has not always been the case. There's been individual agenda. There's been other reasons for people wanting to be on the board. I think you get what you pay for. Now, do I think that we need to jump right into it? I don't. In fact, if it was offered to me now, I would give it back to the city. I would not accept it, because it would be, it wouldn't have appear right. But I think in the future that it would be something to offer a candidate who maybe would be interested in doing it, but couldn't give up the time. And I think you'll all admit it's not 2 nights a month. Not even close to do it right. And Mayor, you need 150,000 for all the hours that you put in.
I think everybody would say the mayor
What-
does quite a bit.
But I do it because I want to. I do it
Absolutely.
because I want to serve the community.
Before we get any resident approval, which I think we should, because I do agree that this is not a good time, and it should not be for now. I'm interested in pursuing the conversation. I think we need more data. I think we need to know, maybe from our finance officer, what would it cost, and would we ever, how would it impact our budget to fund all 5 commissioners at minimum wage for 40 hours a week, just as a ballpark? And would that even be, how would that impact the way we get revenue? What would we have to increase? How would that affect us? Let's have that information before we go any further with with getting resident input. Let's have some answers before we ask them questions. So, as I was 3 years ago when I voted for the insurance, I'm interested in having this conversation, with the full knowledge that if somehow by some miracle it passed before my term is up, I would not accept it.
Then why don't we just plan to put it on a future workshop for discussion?
Absolutely. I would be in favor of that, but I would like to see some figures just so we can see what we're really talking about. You know, if all 5 commissioners opted in for that salary.
Can't be any more than 10% raise. Ten percent, I mean, yeah. Can't be any more than 10% raise, right? We all get like 500 and some odd dollars a month, so $50 extra. I'm just kidding.
Well, minimum wage is $31,200 a year.
That's a lot of
more than
money.
10.
That's
But
not even.
That, and I mean,
Let's just have a
So,
figure.
but-
Let's have a
but-
ballpark. Let's start with minimum wage. That's what we pay some of our employees.
Okay.
I think
I'm just in favor of continuing this
Yes.
conversation.
I think we should have
with
it on
some-
an
With some
agenda.
data to accompany the conversation.
We can do that. I would be in agreement with that.
Well, I've got a question, Clara. Is there a way of putting it on the ballot?
Currently, we have a provision in the charter, which it went to the voters, outlining the criteria for commissioners to set their salary. And then I guess we could change it by another question. Section 411, compensation and expenses. The Board of Commissioners may determine the annual salary of commissioners by ordinance, but no ordinance increasing such ordinance shall become effective until the date of commencement of the terms of commissioners elected at the next regular election, provided that such election follows the adoption of ordinance at least 6 months prior. And if I'm not mistaken, that's also in the statute.
So it sounds like we couldn't give ourselves a raise, is what that
You
sounds
can
like.
determine your own, but if you want it to take place at the next election, the ordinance would have to be adopted at least 6 months before that election. Now, if we're going to have a ballot question on, if, let's say it went on this November, to change the March elections to November, of course, you would still have time to adopt this ordinance if that gets passed. And because the qualifying period won't be into June, we would just have to make sure that that ordinance, whatever you come up with, was adopted 6 months before that November election. Because if it's on November and they passed it, the qualifying period is usually in December. That's going to change to the first 2 weeks in June. So those seats will be extended, and they won't be an election in March. Now, if you changed it to March and you adopted it now, we would have to have the first reading in July, the second no later than August, to meet that 6 months window before that March election. So that, I don't know if you understood that or not, but anyway, you would have to adopt an ordinance 6 months before the election. So if we're changing it to November, if it gets passed, if it's on this November election, we got plenty of time to adopt that ordinance if you should change the salary. But you don't have to take it, the way they have it laid out, you don't take it to the voters to say, hey, look, can the commission, do we have to get voter approval to give ourselves an increase because they've already done it, if that's your question.
I personally am not prepared to take it to the voters yet. I don't have enough information to even,
Yeah, they've already
maybe an
voted on
informal,
this.
maybe an informal survey, but not
Right.
an actual election.
I mean, an informal survey would get you the temperature of how the community's going to be impacted, and we've done them before. I mean, that's just an easy way to get a feel for how people would react. But we can have another discussion at another workshop where everyone can come
Yeah.
more prepared based off what Jerry's brought us today and discussed.
I agree.
So could we add this to a future workshop, City Manager? Jerry, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Jerry.
Appreciate your time. Thank you, guys.
Next on the agenda is discussion changing the March municipal elections to November. Clara?
Yes, and I had touched on that a little bit. I've prepared a full staff memo and also a comprehensive ordinance for both, depending on where it leads to and the commission decides. So I'll briefly do the memo. The ordinances propose amendments to several sections of the city charter to transition municipal elections from March to November, align candidate qualifying periods with the revised election schedule, which that's what I had explained that it would change, clarify the commencement of terms of office following election certification, and establish transition provisions necessary to implement the change. If the Board of Commissioners decides to go forward with the item, the proposed amendments would be submitted to the electors of the City of Madeira Beach for approval at the November 3rd, 2026 municipal election or March the 10th, 2027 municipal election. Okay, the proposed amendments would, either way, would change the municipal election date from March to November to align with the state general election, change the candidate qualifying period from first 2 weeks of December to the first 2 full weeks of June, clarify the terms of the office commenced following election certification and installation, modify induction procedures to ensure consistency with the revised election schedule, establish transitional term extensions necessary to convert from the March election cycle to a November election cycle. All right, conducting elections in November may offer several benefits, which I had provided a voter participation analysis and cost comparison. You probably had an opportunity to read that. I sent it out early. The benefits could be increased voter participation due to the historically higher turnout during general elections. Over time, it was more during November over time. Reduced election administration costs through coordination with the Pinellas County Supervisor of Elections, and improve efficiency in election administration and ballot processing. And because the city currently operates under a March election cycle, transitional provisions are necessary to maintain the charter's staggered election structure and avoid shortening any elected official's term. So temporary term extensions would apply. Now, if it goes on the November 3rd, 2026 municipal general election, if approved by the voters, then Commissioner District 3 and Commissioner District 4 terms currently scheduled to expire in March 27 would be extended until the certification of the November 2027 election results and the installation of the successors. Then Commissioner District 1 and Commissioner District 2 and the Mayor Commissioner terms currently scheduled to expire in March 28 would be extended until the certification of the November 28 election results and the installation of successors. Now, if it's on the March the 10th, 2027 municipal election ballots, with the qualifying period for 3 and 4 will still take place in December, the first 2 weeks in December. Then Commissioner District 1 and Commissioner District 2 and Mayor Commissioner terms currently scheduled to expire in 28 would be extended into the certification of November 28 election results and installation successors, and then it'll just go over a year. Commissioner District 3 and Commissioner District 4 terms currently scheduled to expire in the March 29 of that year would be extended into certification of November 2029 election results and the installation of successors. So I prepared 2 ordinances, like I said. One accommodates if we should place it on the November election and spelling out these terms and conditions. And then if you should wait to put it on the March 27 municipal election, I've laid out everything in the ordinance that applies to what I had just read and how which seats it extend to when. And it's just a temporary extension. And I wanted to mention which I mentioned in the ordinances, and in the staff memo that because we have term limits in the city charter, so I wanted to point out that the ordinance further provides that these temporary extensions shall not be treated as additional terms for purposes of city's consecutive term limit provisions. That won't count. Those little temporary extensions will not count. So, anybody got any questions?
Thank you, Clara. Do we have any public comment? Commission?
Just for clarification, this voter participation analysis and cost comparison, these percentages are only of registered Madeira Beach voters, right?
Yes,
No, it's not outside of Madeira Beach. So
No.
the March percentage is taken from registered Madeira Beach voters, and the November percentage is taken from registered Madeira Beach voters. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Just want to confirm that.
Yes. And you see how it changed over time.
I just want to clarify in terms of like the last March election cost us $7,000, where if we move this to November, it'll cost us roughly $300. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I also believe holding the elections in November with the countywide and statewide general elections may increase voter participation. And like Commissioner Dillon said, it's more cost effective to do that also. So I would be in agreement with moving the elections also.
Right.
Makes sense to move it to November.
I think it makes a lot of sense to move it to November, and if we could get it on this November ballot would be, I think, preferred as to waiting to March. My biggest concern would be making sure that we educate the community on what we're asking for.
Correct. And I'll make
That has
sure
always been a
happens.
challenge for us, right? So if we're going to move forward with this, and I think we're all in agreement to that, then let's make sure that we do some educational for the community so that they understand what we're voting for and that it's not a self-serving to stay an extra 2 years or something like that, right? So that
Correct.
they understand.
And I budget enough each year just in case we should put out information to the public, which I want to all our registered voters. We can do it to individual registered voters or by household. And, give them simplify everything in layman terms where they understand everything, and then have a couple of town halls. I've done those with charter amendments where it would be usually me and the city attorney or the city manager, and people would come in and they would ask questions. And I always get quite a few people that come to those meetings and ask questions. It's pretty effective.
So Attorney Trask, do we need to vote? We need to vote on this at our next meeting so that she can move it forward?
It would need to be
Yeah,
first
so
reading.
the answer is it needs to
Okay.
be on the next agenda.
Then I think we all agree to vote for that we would want the November option,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so this will get moved to our next meeting, which will be July. And that'll be the first reading.
That's correct. It'd be first reading and public hearing, and then again in August, and I've already notified the elections office and everything, so what I'll do is, when it gets, I can go ahead and send it, my information to the Spanish Institute and get my Spanish translation, get my advertisement already prepared, and I send my charter question, my ballot questions to the elections office early. Once it gets approved on first reading going forward, I send that over there early. And if they've got any tweaks or whatever to the questions itself, you know, how you need to capitalize this word or whatever, you know, they let us know. And then it's set in stone, so we have no problem because the deadline for putting anything on the ballot is August the 7th. But as long as she gets everything early, as far as the ballot language and the Spanish translations, they're good with that. So I've already spoke to them, so we're good.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you, Clara.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is City Attorney, the City Attorney Services Contract Extension.
Mayor, Commissioners, at my request, the city attorney has prepared a contract extension for city attorney services. And I'd be happy to go over this. So back in October of 2023, the city entered into a 3-year contract with our law firm, Trastaño LLP. That 3 years is set to expire on October the 10th, 2026, so we've got some time yet. But in talking to the city manager recently, he kind of wanted to, I don't want to speak for you, Mike, but basically to keep some historical analysis available. So in other words, have me around for a little bit longer while he is getting used to the job or getting used to the city of Madeira Beach. But so I've just taken the agreement and extended it 1 year, so that would take it to October of 2027. And the rate is not increased in 3 years. And so I'm asking for the rate to be increased from $2.25 an hour to $2.50 an hour. Most of the other cities around here are higher than that. For example, I think Pinellas Park is $300. Some of the other cities are higher than that. But I'm suggesting changing the billable rate to $2.50 from $2.25, and also increasing the paralegal rate from $90 to $125 an hour. I would also bring to your attention that the retainer would stay the same, but it would be less hours available. So I would work 30 hours for that retainer. It works out to $7,500. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Obviously, you know, we'd be happy to provide you with an agreement for a longer period of time, but this was basically prepared on behalf of the request from the city manager.
Do we have any public comment? Commissioners, any questions or comments?
You said it's less hours. What is the current hours for the retainer?
40 hours
So this-
at $2.25, and this would be 30 hours at $2.50. So the current agreement basically gives the city $1,500 worth of free legal time every month. And I'm no longer interested in giving $1,500 worth of free legal time every month. So I've made it $7,500 for 30 hours, which is 30 hours times $2.50.
Thanks for that clarification.
Sure.
I have one question. Why 1 year extension and not 3?
Again, I prepared this at the request of the city manager. We'd be happy to provide you with a 3-year term with a different rate, but the analysis that I did was just for 1 year, and that. So I'd be happy to bring back to you for discussion purposes a 3-year term if that's what you want to do. But that's the only reason it's coming back to you for a year. Normally, we do these contracts for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I personally would prefer 3 years. I don't know what.
So if it was 3 years, would we get a better rate? Since we're committing?
So if it was 3 years, it would increase every year a little bit, because I don't want to wait 3 years again for another increase. I can't keep up, with the other cities. So to answer your question, it would probably be escalated from 250 to 265 for the second year and maybe 285 the third year, something like that. But, so I'll take whatever direction you want to give me. I'll be happy to think about it a little bit more and provide you with something more than 1 year period of time if that's what you're interested in.
Yeah.
Yes, I would be in agreement with that.
Okay. If you would bring us back some options then at our
Okay.
next workshop, that would be great.
Thank you. I appreciate the
We like
opportunity.
you too much. We want you around for a
Yes,
while.
thank you.
All right. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioner.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is community development, nonconformities, and business tax receipt requirements.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Joe.
So this item was added from request of the commission at a recent workshop meeting based on some feedback because currently the non-conforming section of our code allows non-conforming structures and uses to be rebuilt following a disaster, but if they didn't have a BTR in effect, then they lose those abilities to rebuild and they would have to meet the current code. So we have a few options here, and I'll turn to the page. It starts on page 39 of the packet. But what we did here to address that is, and again, I just want to reiterate that we are planning to redo this entire article of the code, because if you really look at it, it's kind of confusing, hard to follow. So we are planning on eventually doing a comprehensive update to this section of the code. This is just more or less more urgent matters. And at the last meeting that we talked about this, Commissioner Kovahi mentioned Clearwater's ordinance, and to look at that, I looked at that a little bit, and I think that's very helpful for the direction that the commission wants. But that would more come at a later workshop. This is just focusing on some key items. So the first item, which we talked about at the last meeting, what we did here is we added some language. So we're trying to keep the intent of the BTR like was discussed at the last commission meeting. And one reason that it might be important to somewhat tie them together is since the rebuilding after catastrophic loss and rebuilding after involuntary loss allow you to, there is no time limit. So somebody can rebuild to the same non-conforming density or use that they had, even if 50 years passes, as long as it was still relevant to the hurricane. And with a BTR, it makes it easy to track what they had. Without a BTR, it's kind of harder to determine what was legally non-conforming versus what maybe wasn't permitted, and our historical permit records aren't always the best. So what we're proposing here is adding some language basically to those two sections, the involuntary loss and the catastrophic loss, that says if it was related to the 2024 hurricanes, the business tax requirement will be waived. Like, you can still use these sections if you didn't have a business tax receipt, as long as either the permit is applied for or a zoning verification letter is obtained by September 25th, 2027. That deadline is in line with when the RVs are not allowed to remain on the properties in compliance with the Florida statute following a declared disaster. So that's why we picked that deadline. And a zoning verification letter is really easy to obtain. So if somebody's not ready, even 36 months after the hurricane, to submit for a new build or an elevation permit, they can simply obtain a zoning verification letter if they were operating illegally without a BTR, and we can verify what was there, and then we have it in our records. Okay, here's what we said is legal non-conforming, so that way, if it's years from now, we still have the record to show for that. So that's why we're proposing this sort of deadline for people that were operating without a BTR to still allow the non-conforming density or use to retain. Since we have this section open, we do have a couple other changes that we're proposing in here. One of them is relating to the redevelopment planning process, which basically the previous two sections talk about rebuilding after either damage or a declared disaster. And then the rebuilding after catastrophic loss is a third alternative to rebuilds a non-conforming use, for example, when there's no disaster, and that has to go through public hearings. It goes to the planning commission. I believe it goes to you guys as well. And right now, that section of the code is applicable to anyone except for those in the R1 zoning district. And the R1 zoning district, that's where a lot of our primary residents are. And based on the feedback that we're kind of getting from you guys at the last workshop, we're proposing an option to strike that the R1 zoning district wouldn't be able to apply for that. So the same criteria, the criteria for the redevelopment planning process is similar to what they can already do by right with the catastrophic loss. It just would also apply if it's not disaster related. And again, that would have to go through public hearing anyway. So that second proposal would just open that door for residents or property owners in the R1 zoning district that have a non-conforming use or structure, such as the only allowed use in R1 is single family. So right now, if it's not single family and it's in the R1 zoning district, you can only rebuild it if it's following a disaster or if the house catches fire or something like that. So that's the third proposed change. The other proposed change here is relating both to the rebuilding regulations for catastrophic loss and the redevelopment planning process for if it's non-conforming commercial. Right now the code is pretty vague. It just says you can rebuild within the same footprint, but it just has to meet the minimum FEMA regulations. It doesn't say, well, what if it's not the same footprint or it's not the same, or if it's not the FEMA regulations. What we're proposing here is we're clarifying that same footprint, and we're also adding that they can rebuild to the same floor area ratio, and that's more the limiting factor for commercial, whereas residential, more the limiting factor is a lot of times the residential density. And then anything that's not relating to the same footprint or the floor area ratio would have to meet their current codes. Right now it says minimum FEMA regulations. Really, they probably intended to mean like the current FEMA regulations, including our freeboard. So it's just really just cleaning that up and clarifying that floor area ratio would be included in that, since that's really the limiting factor for commercial. The other changes shown in here don't affect how we currently interpret the code. They're more clarification. I'd be happy to explain any of them if you have any questions. The only other item that we didn't show in here that we wanted to bring to the commission's attention is the non-conforming when a structure is at grade or it's damaged less than 50%. Recently we adopted this, we've changed this ordinance to extend the deadline from 18 months to 2 years. So that 2-year deadline is September of this year. The intent of that is really we want to get people going. We want to, especially for FEMA documentation, we're expected to document every single non-conforming structure that's at grade. Where's the permits? What, like, why is it still here? Did it get damaged? How much damage? So we sent out mailers. We sent about 500 mailers to the properties that we have documentation that it's not elevated and almost certainly received damage, to get some feedback from the residents, to get permits submitted for structures that were worked on without permits. And in some rarest cases, they might not have gotten damaged, like on the high side of Lillian. So just getting documentation on that so that when FEMA audits the property, we can provide documentation. And we got a lot of feedback from those letters, which is good. That's really the main goal there. So we're opening this back up to see if the commission would be open to extending that deadline to another year, to September of 2027. Because ultimately the goal here is really to get people moving and to have documentation on all these properties. If we didn't extend the deadline, then it would just result in us having to deny the permits for anyone that wants to rebuild under the 50% rule once we hit that deadline. So, and that, if we extended that deadline another year, we would also extend the deadline. Right now it says you have to get the permit within 2 years. We would extend that to 3 years. And then right now it says it has to be completed within 3 years. We'd extend that another year. So that's all I have. Open to any questions, feedback.
Do we have any public comment?
afternoon, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. I live on Bay Point Drive.
Would you pull the mic down just a
I
little?
live on Bay
Thank
Point
you.
Drive, 834 Bay Point Drive. I received a letter in the mail threatening to have my house destroyed by the city of Madeira Beach if I do not complete a permit and the work done. That's just ridiculous. Number one, you need to get your house in order and have the streets repaired. They're dangerous. They are dangerous for a pedestrian, for a bicyclist, and a motorist on Bay Point Drive, and the streets coming in on 140th. They're unbelievable. It looks like a war zone when you go through there. And you're telling me I have to repair my house or you'll tear it down? It's just completely ridiculous. You're making proposals, and I've been in and talked to the staff who, I have to say, don't know anything. Can you give me a copy of the ordinance of 2026-02? Oh, we don't have a copy of that, but you're threatening me with the rules and regulations of this ordinance? Oh, you have to rebuild your house according to the FEMA regulations. It has to be built, reproduced as it was. No, my house was not substantially damaged, exactly as it was. But if you had marble countertops, you can replace it with Formica. If you have a large kitchen, you don't have to build the kitchen. Well, that's not exactly as it was. Can you give me the FEMA regulations that you quoted that you said I have to rebuild it to? Oh, we don't have that. I'm just sorry that I feel really threatened by the city. But now I find out really all this is to get some feedback from the residents, so you can say, oh, we did this, and now we want to get an extension for it. But that's an inappropriate way to go about it, to threaten the destruction of my house and my property because you need to get your rules and regulations in order. And thank you for just showing the inadequacies of that regulation. And, oh, we want to extend it, and we really don't know what it means, and we've got all these, oh, you have an extended timeline, but I just really felt that was the wrong way to go about it. I just don't think that's the appropriate way to threaten the city residents of Madeira Beach that you're going to come and destroy my house if I don't have a permit made. And I said, well, okay, if I get a demolition permit and it's only good for 180 days and I don't get it done, can I get another one? Well, we don't really know. Well, there was just no guidelines for it. I just think you really overextended yourself on making that kind of, sending that letter out. It would have been much more appropriate to say, we're looking for feedback from you about what, we have to do. And I understand you have to get it. FEMA won't insure all the people that have $4 million houses out here, and they're going to be really upset if you don't meet their guidelines, because then you're not going to get the FEMA insurance approval. I understand that. I just want to give you my feedback that I didn't think that was the right way to go about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any additional public comment? Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments for staff?
Do we have a copy of that letter that can be shared?
So I have a couple comments for staff. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, I had talked about this with Marcy. I did speak with someone who had received a letter, and they were concerned about not meeting the deadline because they're in a program, and what they could do to make sure that they were compliant, understanding that they needed to comply with what the letter said. And I want to say this for the record for anybody who might be watching, and for the gentleman who I will speak with hopefully tomorrow, to tell him that what we would want him to do is send an email to the building department with his address and say what program he's in, or that he's applied for and is awaiting on acceptance to be able to move forward, so that the city then has a record and it would be flagged. I also had a conversation with a group of people who they did their repairs to their home after the storm and did not get a permit. And I know we're all very, very much advocating. I know I advocate it wherever I am if the conversation comes up about getting in and applying for your after-the-fact permit. And there are people who are talking and spreading, their opinions that they heard the city's going to be really terrible and they're going to make you rip out walls and they're going to make you do this. So I've shared with anyone who's brought the comment up or asked about it that yes, you need to get a permit. You need for it to be FEMA compliant. The city is working with every homeowner. There are ways to work through to get the permit. You're not going to have to rip everything out and redo everything just because you did it before, but there are things that we're going to do. So to please come in and file for that after the fact permit so that the building official can work with those homeowners to be able to get their permits and get them closed out. And the other thing I wanted to say is, yes, I would be totally in favor of extending that to 2027. I recognize that when we started sitting through calls after Helene and we listened to South Florida, or not even all the way south, but the cities south of us who had gone through hurricanes recently before us, that they were 3 to 5 years before their cities started looking better, even longer for some. And so as much as I understand the frustration from residents who get the letters or get communication, and it's frustrating, I appreciate the staff and the way that we have done our best to pivot and adjust. I sat through the Big C meeting today where Pinellas County came and presented on the Forerunner software. And so we are not unique to having challenges in communication with the community. And I think that, I know that staff has done it with the best of intent. We learn every day. We make adjustments, and I've witnessed that for the last almost 2 years. And so I would very much be in favor of extending to 2027 and allowing the residents the opportunity. That is the goal, is to get people to understand the urgency that we comply so that we are, when we're audited by FEMA, we are doing what we need to do. And I would ask, did that letter come out of Forerunner?
We sent that through Forerunner.
So, I mean, I haven't read it. I got a copy of one, but I admittedly didn't read the entire letter to be able to understand it. I was more concerned with following up on what was the process for a homeowner to do to make sure that they were compliant. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Yep, and just to add on to that, as you mentioned, yes, we record conversations in Forerunner, so even if we have, so what I was thinking about adding to our next letter is a link to actually see it so anyone could do it. But on our Forerunner public website, anybody from the public can go and see all the properties that we have listed as no permit status, which basically means we don't have any data. Like, we know it's at grade and there was a hurricane, but we don't know what happened after that. That's basically what that means. And that those are the people that got the letters. And we get CRS credits for recording conversations with residents or developers in Forerunner. So when somebody comes in and tells us, like, here's why I'm not going to meet the deadline or whatever, we'll at a minimum record that conversation in Forerunner so that we can track it. And then also just wanted to throw in, I didn't mention it earlier, but I was at the Florida Floodplain Managers Association conference a couple weeks ago, and Pinellas County stated that they're going to start doing they're going to start working code enforcement action on the properties that got substantial damage and didn't pull any permits starting in January. So what we're doing, we're not proposing to start code enforcement action, but we are requiring permits and requiring documentation.
And that, I mean, and we're being pushed to do that to be compliant with FEMA, regardless of, I just, thank you. Because I know you guys are trying, and when you're the resident, this I know loud and clear, when you're the resident that your home flooded, there's an emotional attachment that you have that goes beyond the home and the contents. It's very emotional, and I think people are really still going through that. It's obvious that it's challenging. So anything that reads to be strong can be difficult to take from a resident's perspective, and I can appreciate that. But I also appreciate all that staff is doing to try to help the residents move forward.
And just to be clear, when we sent the letter out, we didn't do it just to see where it went or anything like that. We sent it out with all intent of hoping we could really satisfy the September deadline. But like everything else in recovery, we've pivoted based on the feedback, and the feedback drove us to discuss, here's all the various answers we're getting. Here's the hurdles. We now have full stories of all of this. So that's why we come back to you and say, listen, we've learned from this and here's what we're offering. So when it initially went out, the goal was to see if we could achieve this genuinely. But again, like I said, we pivot as we learn.
Thank you.
Mayor, can I address one thing too?
Yes.
I want to talk about the last section of the ordinance, which is paragraph D, dealing with aggregation of non-conforming density. It says that the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners may approve an alternative site and building configurations. My suggestion is that, first of all, the Planning Commission doesn't have the legal authority to do that. They can't be doing it. And my advice to you is that the Board of Commissioners should not be doing it for a couple of different reasons. One, it politicizes it a little bit. But second of all, it also slows down the process. So my suggestion to you is to change this language to reflect that the community development director would have the authority to change or approve alternative site and building configurations. And so you don't have to hear that. So I would like to propose that when it comes back, it would have that change unless there's an objection.
That would keep it more at a staff level decision where they could, yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
I would definitely agree with that. Is there anything additional?
I've got a couple.
Okay.
The BTRs, we've discussed this many times. Do we have a list of who all we've sent BTRs to, and have they been sent out? I mean, now that we've got this information Andrew got from this, you see all the duplexes, you see the triplexes, and the people are selling, and I just saw this morning on Google or Zillow that one of the houses in my neighborhood is a triplex on the water, and I don't think they did anything, and I believe they're selling it the second time. It was sold in 24 after the hurricane. Now it's for sale again, and it's a triplex. I mean, and so I'm like, just kind of trying to make sure that you guys are trying to wrap all of this up into one thing where it's, and going through this. And then I had questioned in terms of 4. It's page 46. Any such non-conforming characteristic shall be made compliant with this code. So non-conforming characteristics, that's kind of vague, and then you're going to be kind of vague again going back. So I don't know that that's really helping things out.
Gotcha. Yep. So I'll address the first question first. I forgot to mention it, but we are trying to be more proactive with BTR. So another concern is most people don't even realize they need a BTR. In the past, I found some evidence that the city might have, in like 2015, 2016, may have sent letters to like duplexes and triplexes that didn't have a BTR to let them know. We have our BTRs in MGO now, so we should be able to pull a list of all properties that do have a BTR, whether it's grandfathered for nightly rental and that data. Two things that we are looking to start implementing to be more proactive with requiring BTRs is, number one, when people do a lien search when they're selling the property, we're starting to add whether they have a BTR or not on the lien search. And then the second thing that we're exploring doing is on permits for a building that would typically require a BTR, like a new commercial building or even a remodel of a triplex, putting a requirement that wouldn't hold up the permit from being closed out, but a requirement after that for a BTR check for us to review if they have a BTR, and if not, send a notice. So it would be flagged. So it would be flagged during sales when they do a lien search, and then during permitting. Those are two options we're exploring there. And then as far as the other question with the characteristics of use, it is vague. I definitely agree. During my research on other cities' codes on the non-conforming section, most of them don't even have a characteristics of use section at all. Usually just falls under like the principal use or the structure. This is really basically, and again, if we didn't add this in there, if there's any concern, we could take this out. It really wouldn't change the way that we're enforcing things anyways. When we do redo the non-conforming section, we want to be more specific on what exactly a characteristic of a use is. This is more just a temporary fix, and it's vague because it's already vague and we don't want to create new regulations. But this is basically saying, like, if you have, like, obviously one of the examples it lists is parking. When you build this is saying when you build a new development, you have to meet the current standards for like parking and lighting. This section of the code we don't really have too many issues with, but it's just saying, like, you know, if the lot is vacant right now and it doesn't have landscaping, somebody can't use this section to say, oh, well, when it was vacant, it didn't have landscaping, so I can keep the non-conforming landscaping. That's really all that is.
Okay, so then finally, in terms of, I know you guys have been working on this and I appreciate it. So from the standpoint, if this is what you feel is very good, then, you know, I think it's necessary. The other thing is, are we doing anything, or is there anything retroactive? Because this is where it came up originally, where a resident purchased the property, you know, and then they realized they didn't have a BTR because the last owner did not have a BTR. The current one does. So is there anything in here that is going to be I don't want to say a catch-all, but like a, you know, to help our residents out?
Yep, so it would go into effect for all properties once this is adopted. So if, like, for example, we had 2 properties in specific that were denied because of these, once this is adopted, they would be able to apply for a permit just like anybody else. And just because it got denied the first time, now that the code is amended, we would be able to retroactively move forward.
This fixes it, Lauren.
Great, thank you very much.
Anything additional?
With regard to the commercial property, so this, just to clarify, this ordinance allows commercial properties to retain their existing floor area ratio. Is that correct?
Correct. If it was
Do
legal.
we have any idea how many commercial properties this will be affected by this clarification, or?
Not really. It would be hard to tell exactly.
Oh, I guess that, okay. Is this a real policy change, or is it simply a clarification of an existing practice?
So it's kind of a gray area in the code because we believe that the intent was to allow the floor area ratio to be retained, but technically it would be a policy change because technically it doesn't specify that the floor area ratio, it's kind of in that middle area where it says you have to meet these regulations, but you don't have to meet these, and floor area isn't mentioned either way, so it's kind of a gray area, like, do they get to keep it? But technically, probably right now, they probably would not. And
So it's a policy change because prior it was so vague, it's hard to know what it was.
Yes, correct.
Understood. Would this, could it result in, could retention of existing floor area ratio result in larger commercial buildings than would otherwise be permitted today?
Possibly, it wouldn't allow for anything bigger than what's in existence today, but it does have the potential to allow something that might not be allowed today but has been in existence, which currently would probably get denied because it might not meet today's standard, but it's been in
Potential's
existence.
there.
What's that?
The potential is there for.
Potential is there, yes. So if that's a concern, we can take that out and wait until we do the full non-conforming section.
I'd love to have that potential not there.
If it's okay,
Well, if
my-
they're non-conforming, then,
Well, if it's non-conforming, once you accept the non-conformity, then you are automatically terminating the non-conformity. So, and I think that needs to come before this board to be approved. Any non-conformity to become terminated, and from that point on, it becomes conforming to code, it needs to come before this board and gets approved.
What if we left it in for the redevelopment planning process, which would require it to come before you guys, but removed it for the rebuilding after catastrophic loss? I mean, I don't think it would affect, because the properties in Johns Pass now have a higher FAR that encompasses them. Mostly this was to clarify, because it's kind of weird to, so when with commercial properties, we look at floor area ratio, which is this enclosed square footage. And it's kind of weird that it talks about footprint, but it doesn't mention because we don't, I mean, we look at setbacks and other, but floor area ratio is what regulates commercial. But if you want it to be required to go to the board, then if we could leave it in the redevelopment planning process, but then it was mostly just to clarify that, I mean.
if you think that change would diminish that potential, then yes.
Yeah. So.
And I have a couple more questions.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Well, if the intent is to clarify, is the intent, so residential, we have some properties who we're addressing because of something they didn't have, they cannot rebuild. So is the clarification and intent to allow a commercial business that flooded during the hurricane to be able to rebuild their non-conforming business as it was before the storm?
So it'd have to be FEMA compliant and be in the same footprint if they wanted to use that provision, but without the FAR being in there, then it's like, what if it's in the same footprint, but then what if the FAR is slightly higher than, if it's along Gulf Boulevard, it'd be 0.55.
So if I own a business and my building is non-conforming, it's been there since 1950, I've operated a business in it, and during the hurricane or a hurricane, I flood, and I want to put my business back together, is this going to allow me to put my business back to what it was before the hurricane?
Well, in a new FEMA compliant building.
I can't fix the building I have. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so
Can I
if you-
fix the building I have with this clarification?
Without this clarification, if you can't fix the building you have, so it's damaged more than 50%, you would not be able to have the business rebuilt to the same intensity that exists.
But if I was over 50%, this clarification would allow me to build it back in that footprint with flood proofing and everything that's required under FEMA for a business?
Correct.
I mean, I personally don't want to keep a business from rebuilding what they had before the storm just because a catastrophic event happened, any more than I want to keep a homeowner from rebuilding their home if they can do it compliant to FEMA. That's my, and if that's what this does, then I would be in favor of this for that purpose.
Nonconformity generally comes with the zoning regulation. In other words, the setback doesn't meet code, that's nonconforming
But
to
a
the setback.
ton of Madeira Beach is non-conforming.
Yes.
A ton of it is
That's exactly right. So
Yeah.
I'm sort of describing nonconformity, you know. What does it mean when we say a project is nonconforming? So it's either setback, height, ISR, FAR.
I don't think it
Yeah.
matters when you're talking about a damaged building. We're not talking about coming in and getting a permit to build a new building. That's not what this is.
No, but we're approving the building the way it is. We will be saying, yes, you have been non-conforming, you can just, from here on, you'll be conforming.
To clarify, rebuilding after catastrophic loss and redevelopment planning process are both for new construction, tearing down a over or damaged building that was, well, one is for if it was damaged during a declaration disaster area event, hurricane, and others voluntarily through the redevelopment planning process. But so these would be someone tearing and building a new building and having certain rights protect, like with the commercial one right now, you retain your footprint, but it doesn't mention anything about FAR.
I also agree with Mayor Brooks also on the extension, to extend the deadline till 2027. I'm just going to make this really quick. We can continue to get the after-the-fact permits. How many, roughly, not specifically, how many non-conforming residential houses are there in Madeira?
So we consider, and kind of going on what Commissioner Kavahi says, generally nonconformities a lot of times are related to zoning, but we can also consider our floodplain regulations are in the land development code. If it's not conforming to that, we consider it a non-conforming structure too. So almost every residential building, unless it's fully compliant with today's floodplain regulations and the setbacks and everything, almost every property is non-conforming in some way.
And when you sent out those letters, what was the percentage of response that you guys got back?
It's hard to tell. We haven't tracked an exact percent. Next time I come back, I can get a rough number. But we sent about 500. I don't know the exact number of response we got, but it feels like a lot, but a lot of times one feels like a lot.
Right. And I thank you for all your hard work too, by the way, also. I believe that's all I have, but definitely get the after-the-fact permits. And one thing I might want to add, this is a big issue. This is a very big issue. This is very important to Madeira Beach. I would be inclined to have another public hearing here on this issue. But I'm all for the extension of the deadline.
Another public hearing on what issue?
On just so that all the residents can understand, you know, some residents might not understand what's conforming or non-conforming. We could do it.
So I think the purpose of this, what we're talking about today, is to move forward a change in the code that allows people to rebuild.
Absolutely.
It's tied specifically to the storm. So, right, this is so specific to the storm. And in particular, we have 2 properties right now in the city that need this to be changed. And potentially you'll have more, because I believe that there are more properties that are waiting on the change to even submit for their rebuild.
Yes, and I'm just saying that if we just had a public meeting so everyone's on the same page, some people might not understand all of this, you know? And I'm just saying, as a layperson, you know, not being an expert, that if we got everyone together so that everyone's on the same page, that would be really good, beneficial for the residents, I believe.
One possible recommendation is we can maybe create a video that we can have on our website or something, or maybe even link in the next letter explaining what it means, so that might get more attention than another meeting, just an option.
I agree with that.
So I wasn't quite done. Could these changes lead to larger buildings than currently exist on affected properties?
No, not unless it conforms. No, these changes would not.
Could not, good. Will neighboring property owners receive notice and have an opportunity to comment on redevelopment applications?
So the proposed change wouldn't change the actual process of the redevelopment process. So those are still public meetings that people can attend and leave public comment.
And just to be clear, this is a public meeting.
That is correct.
And it's available.
That is correct.
As we speak and after we're done. Do these changes make it easier or harder for non-conforming properties to eventually become conforming over time?
It would make it harder to come into compliance with the current code over time, because we're allowing the nonconformity to persist longer. We're allowing more avenues to rebuild uses and structures that don't conform to the current code.
Thank you. Will the city be able to distinguish between an owner who simply failed to renew a BTR and one who was operating entirely outside city requirements?
So, are you asking in reference to like if somebody didn't have a BTR?
Yeah.
If they didn't have a BTR, would we be able to determine whether they were operating without one? Or
I guess it's kind of a judgment call.
So I don't think that this change is only intended for people who didn't have BTRs when Hurricane Helene hit.
the BTR portion of this
Right,
change?
the
correct?
BTR portion is only for that. And I can tell you, and I've said this in a previous meeting, and I'm gonna tell it again. I had a online business out of my house that required a BTR. When I went through all the paperwork to get incorporated and get my LLC and everything I did, nobody said you need a BTR in Madeira Beach. It was nowhere that I needed that.
Right, so it would be a judgment call. Right.
No, I want you to understand, when I found out I needed a BTR, it's because I got on the commission and I shadowed the building department. And the day I went and sat with the person who does the BTRs, they had recently started actively enforcing or going out to do BTRs. I had no idea, and I was a commissioner. I had been on the planning commission.
I've learned a lot when I've been on this board too.
So my point is, I don't think that most people, I won't say all, but I don't think that most people are trying to not get a BTR. It's not expensive. It's very inexpensive. It's they don't know. And so this change is so that people who didn't have a BTR before Helene and Milton can rebuild, and they have taken an active approach to educating the community on BTRs and are looking for additional ways to get that message out, and they continue to do that. So I don't think focusing on the BTR is the point of this change. It's to allow those that didn't have it before that storm. If you didn't get it after this campaign, you're not going to get that grace because it's going to be so much information and informative. So I think that's the difference to understand.
Understood.
So for what it's worth, the county doesn't have any BTR.
Well, we're not
No.
the county.
Understood, but just saying,
But the BTR, it does a lot of things. So the BTR.
it's a good thing to have.
It is a good thing to have, and it's very beneficial for the city in many different ways, not in a financial, because we're not making money off of BTRs.
Keep record of things.
Right.
So I was just trying to get, most of the questions I had prepared, we've answered, so just one more. Do you think that this amendment could inadvertently reduce incentives for future compliance with BTR requirements?
No, I don't think so, because we're tying it, what we're proposing here is tying it specifically to the hurricanes. That is a good question, but I would say no.
Thank you. I'm finished with questions. I'm certainly in favor of extending.
Okay, I got a couple of things. This is something that we should get going on soon. So do you feel that you would be able to get these changes done and bring it before us in July?
So I'll have to look at the calendar, but since this is in our land development regulations, it would need to go to the planning commission next.
Okay, I mean, and that's just like we were saying, that you guys have been working on this diligently, and I thank you for it, and there's, yes. So as soon as you can get this out, just like and so long as we're not changing, they're non-conforming and they're going to be staying non-conforming. So that's not really an issue. If they're non-conforming now, they're going to continue to be non-conforming, but they're just going to have to get BTRs, and we're getting more language straightened out to help the people through this stuff.
Okay, with no additional comments, we will move on to landscaping regulations.
Oh, yeah.
So the landscaping regulations begin on page 53 of the agenda packet. This is a rough draft. The city attorney has not looked at it yet, and it will also need to go to the planning commission. So these are really just to get your feedback and kind of the direction we're heading. In the memo, we highlight 5 key areas of concern. Number 1 is the landscape requirements, which are causing permit delays at closeout. That's really the driving factor here. And this is where we're looking for the most feedback on, starting on page 55 and 56 is our current code. And in 4 different colors, I have 4 different kind of options on ways we can go, but really it boils down to the current code requires 25% of all residential single-family duplex or triplex lots to have 25% living ground cover. So technically, when you drive around and you see somebody that has all shell, that's not compliant. This code the enforcement has been inconsistent in the past, and it's a really outdated section of code, in staff's opinion. So we want to get feedback from the commission on whether any landscaping at all, if we need to require it. The comprehensive plan doesn't really require it. It requires it for trees in certain areas, which I'll talk about when we get to the tree section. We're not proposing to remove the tree requirement. It's really getting feedback. We already have ISR and tree requirements. Do we still want to regulate the landscaping? It's more of an aesthetic thing. And if so, to what extent? Right now, it's 25% of the lot has to be ground cover. So do we want to amend that to allow shell to count as ground covered? Do we want to keep it as 25% living ground cover, but it may be instead of 25% of the whole lot, just a quarter of the required impervious surface ratio? So in R2, for example, the ISR is 70%, so you need 30% impervious. Maybe we can do a portion of that required. The first item is really getting feedback from the commission and the public on what the goal is for landscaping and what you want to see throughout the community. Keeping in mind it's mostly an aesthetic thing, and stormwater is a concern for the community, but we also have ISR requirements. Second item is artificial turf. A lot of cities now have artificial turf written directly in their ordinance. For example, Clearwater has just passed a pretty elaborate artificial turf code. They passed that in 2025. So it was after Senate Bill 180, but before some new guidance came out from the state, which I've attached to the memo, which basically states that once FDP releases standards for artificial turf, we cannot prohibit it from being installed on a single-family lot. Right now, the current code says you need 25% living ground cover, so we're technically in conflict with that for single-family homes. And FDP did just release that guidance about a month ago. I've included that, and I took that into consideration as well as Clearwater and some other cities' codes in the proposed section 10637, which talks about artificial turf. The main goals here is making sure that when we're crediting it, it meets the DEP standards for permeability, because that's a big concern for the city, making sure we're not reducing permeability. If it's not installed correctly, it's not going to allow the water to drain through. And just to be clear, even though our code doesn't specifically mention artificial turf in any way, you still do currently need a permit for it because it falls under our vague definition of a structure, which means anything that is permanently affixed to the ground. So just being more specific here wouldn't necessarily be more restrictive than we currently are. It's just providing some more clear guidance. The third item is right-of-way landscape materials. So a lot of other cities regulate what can go in the right-of-way. We don't have any regulation. It's been a talk since I've started about how we don't restrict what people put in the right-of-way, and it causes a lot of issues for public works when we have to do maintenance. So that would be adding some language to our code similar to what other municipalities have, stating that only living ground cover, essentially, and vegetative cover approved by the city would be allowed in the right of way, except for when there's a sidewalk, walkway, or driveway. The fourth item is intersection visibility. Right now, our code has four different sections where it talks about intersection visibility, and all four of them pretty much more or less contradict each other. So this proposed change, we're kind of keeping the way we currently enforce it and interpret those regulations, which is, I included a diagram on page 69. The way we currently interpret it and what's being proposed here is a 25-foot distance, and then anything that's between 3 feet and 8 feet in height in that triangle would have to be clear for obviously safety reasons for driving. That's similar to what other cities have. One thing that would be changing here is we would reduce the 25 feet to 15 feet if it's abutting an alley, and the code already has a definition for an alley, which is a right-of-way that's 15 feet or less, so you're typically driving slower on those. So the proposed change with the intersection visibility is more cleanup, and it's striking it from all of the other contradicting sections and moving it into the zoning code, which is where it really belongs. In this section of the code, there's also information about how to measure setbacks, how to determine building height, how to measure the lot width. So this is where we find the most appropriate section for the intersection visibility to be. And then in the landscape code, we would just simply strike it and reference that section. And then the fifth overall change here is going on to the tree regulations. Again, the enforcement has been inconsistent in the past, so just cleaning up the code. Right now, there's a lot of contradictions even within this section. For example, it lists some prohibited trees, but then it has some of the same species as an allowed tree to count towards the landscape requirements, which obviously doesn't conflicts itself. At a first glance, it looks like all of the tree species are being struck through, but in this draft, and again, this hasn't been reviewed by the city attorney yet, what we're doing is we're simply, instead of listing the species directly in our code, we're referencing the University of Florida Friendly Plant List, which we already reference, but one of these categories, the OK category, doesn't exist anymore, so just updating that to allow any Florida native, or right now we have salt tolerant, we could change that also to drought tolerant. The website is pretty user friendly on being able to sort which types of trees should be allowed, or not allowed, but rather counted towards the landscape requirements. And then the trees that are considered dangerous or not allowed to be planted, instead of listing those, we're referencing the same list that Pinellas County references in their ordinance in this proposed change. And that is in line with the trees that we already have on the list, which are also in the city's comprehensive plan, which talks about that the city should try and limit the removal of trees unless they're considered dangerous. So I'm happy to explain any changes, answer any questions.
Do we have any public comment? Commissioners, any questions
So
or comments?
first, that one link was very deceiving. There's a lot to this. So I have a few, not about every single one. What problems are we experiencing that these code changes are intended to solve?
So the primary problem is that when we're going out and doing landscape inspections, which haven't always been done in the past, we can't legally close out the permit because it doesn't comply with our landscape code, which says you have to have 25% living ground cover, and a lot of people want to use artificial turf or shell. So that's the primary reason, and because of that, since we're changing the code, and there's other contradictions that led us to just fix everything all at once, if you will.
If the rocks and shells or the astroturf were water permeable, would you, I mean, what am I trying to say? They're not allowed now, but would this amendment, would these changes allow that?
This provides an option to allow that, yes.
To allow that. Will the proposed changes apply retroactively to existing homes and businesses or only to new projects or major renovations?
It would apply retroactively once it's adopted. So there are 2 properties where we, for lack of better words, gave them like a conditional CO where we felt it was reasonable. So we're not going to hold them up from being able to move into their house because the landscaping doesn't comply with an outdated code. But they do have an open permit. So once this is resolved, we can take action to make sure that they are in compliance.
Thank you. And regarding now the artificial turf, so the clarification you're putting in there would make it possible for the residents to use it if it was water permeable?
Yeah, so the proposed change here would allow it to count towards the landscape requirements if it meets those requirements, which come from the DEP standards of being permeable, which already is what we enforce.
Okay. I don't have any questions about the impervious surface, right-of-way landscaping, no questions about that. Trees, question. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead. You want to go ahead? A couple questions. Basically, it's basically on the residential landscaping requirements, and I would like to address that for the board and people that are watching. We're at 25% right now. St. Pete Beach is at 20%.
They're at 20% of their required impervious. Ours is right now 20%, 25% of the entire lot.
Okay. Why can't we, this is basically with residential landscaping, go down to 0%? And just as you were speaking earlier, post-hurricane, post-storm, if I bought a house and I want to make it aesthetically pleasing to myself, and I prefer to have it all shell, I should have that right. If I bought a house, as long as it's not hurting anyone else, because I remember during the hurricane, I lived on 144th, and I watched mulch and debris and grass and everything else go floating down the street. I rarely seen any shell floating down the street, and you know what I'm getting at. So basically, I believe that. Can I read real quick an email one of the residents sent to me?
You can say whatever you like.
Well, as a resident of a home on 144th and North Bay Shore Drive, this issue is both personally and professionally important to me. I have an open permit that has been held up because I chose to use shell as ground cover rather than grass or sod. And I believe the current code interpretation not only creates unnecessary hardship for residents still recovering from the hurricanes, but also works against the environmental health of our waterways and our coastline. So basically, what I'm getting at is I believe the homeowner should have the right at 0% if they want shell. So that's what I wanted to throw in there.
Okay, I'm ready finally. The triangle, the intersection visibility, that's major. That's needed to be done a long time. And especially signage, and to be strict because there's some of these corners that you can't see and trying to go around them. So that's something very important. The artificial turf, is there any way that you guys can kind of check that? I mean, because I know Marcy's been dealing with the impervious pavers. So impervious pavers can count towards those 25% as well. And I didn't really see anything in here for that. However, I mean, if I'm opposed to the zero unless Shells can count towards that 25%. Because you have to have runoff, and even Shells, you're going to have a lot of potential. I love Shells by far, majorly more than mulch. I mean, and mulch is something we cannot get rid of because it's the state. The state will not let us do that. But the other thing is I do believe in there, everything has to be confined, and that's the big key. So if you have mulch, it's got to be confined in the areas, and I had other questions that you answered in your presentation, so I think this is very good, and moving forward with this, I like it.
Cool. I just want to clarify something. So you had mentioned the permeable pavers. Just to clarify, because I think there's confusion there. So we do give 100% credit for permeable pavers and artificial turf for the ISR requirements, but not the landscape requirements. So if somebody wanted to put their entire lot as permeable pavers with a spec sheet, even though we would count it towards the ISR, we would give them full credit there. It still wouldn't meet the definition of landscaping. So just to clarify that, and so a proposed change here, we're not proposing to change that, so you still wouldn't be able to put permeable pavers across the entire lot, because that wouldn't count as 25% landscape. It would help them out. They could put more than regular pavers because the ISR requirements are usually more stringent than the landscape requirements. But just to clarify right now, we regulate turf kind of the same way that we regulate permeable pavers.
Okay.
And, yep, I do want to, I will make sure, if we don't already have it, that there's language that requires that the mulch or any other material has to be contained on site.
And then also I was, at first the people have artificial turf and they can't have it in the right of way, but they can have it in the right of way if you guys approve it, which is basically would be saying like a house. If they have artificial turf in front of their house, but their house has a 20-foot setback, they're not going to have grass in that 20-foot for the city to maintain, because the residents have to maintain that anyway. Correct?
True, so the language does keep it open for the Public Works Director to make that call, but after speaking with the Public Works Director, it's more likely that we really don't want turf in the city's right-of-way because it creates a maintenance issue. The code, this proposed change would allow turf on the property, but on the public right-of-way, it would be at the discretion of the Public Works Director, which most likely wouldn't be allowed. But anything that's existing would be obviously allowed. It would be considered legal non-conforming. And that's also in line with what the other city codes I looked at, especially to put it in perspective, the city of Clearwater, when they passed their artificial turf ordinance, they actually required that anyone that has artificial turf in the right of way, they said it's not permitted, black and white. And if you already have it, you have to get an after the fact permit for us to decide if you can even keep it. So what we're proposing here is it's at the Public Works Director's discretion. It probably wouldn't be allowed to be added, but anything that's existing, we wouldn't require them to get an after the fact permit like Clearwater did.
But if the homeowner has to maintain it and the city's not maintaining it, how is it going to affect the city as opposed to the owner?
Looks like Megan's coming to help me out here.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. So the issue with turf in the right-of-way is the restoration after a road project. So currently, right now, Area 3, we have somebody who put in turf who did not properly install the turf. And the restoration of turf is astronomical, and it's just, so it makes it a lot easier for us if it's not in the right-of-way. If you so choose to allow it in the right-of-way, we can come up with some kind of agreement for the property owner to have to, like, we're not responsible for restoring it after. I would be okay with that.
I would be inclined for that. That way, if somebody wanted it, they'd have to accept the full responsibility
Yes.
And that way you don't have to be concerned with it, and they know when they do it that, because you have to permit turf here, don't you? Right.
Correct, yeah.
So that would just be part of the permit process, and that way if they were going to run the turf all the way to the sidewalk and there was a right of way there, they would just be responsible, or all the
Yes.
way to the road or to the curb or what have you.
I think I can think of a few other locations in the city that the
That's
city
like
has
that.
allowed things like that in the right of way. The problem is documenting that and ensuring that it's known down the line that
Right.
that agreement exists. And I think Marcy's
Well, if we make it, if we change it here to say that, right? So I read the different paragraphs that you put in as recommendations, and I don't think any one of them is good. I think, well, because I think they all have something really good that if you piece them together, and especially after hearing some of this conversation and reading some correspondence that we've received in regards to turf and shell and native plants, however you wordsmith it, I am greatly in favor of letting people use turf if it's permitted and documented correctly and installed correctly. Shell, I wish that we could make everyone get rid of mulch. It's terrible for the drainage systems. It clogs the valves. It's horrible and it's ugly, but you can't make everybody do shell, even though that looks beautiful. And when it compacts, it doesn't float away when you get a flood. And native plants. So when I read them all, to me, they all seemed like each one had something really good in it, but not one of them really met the needs of what I feel like you're trying to accomplish in making the change.
True, yeah, thank you for that. I more put those highlighted options in there just to
Yeah.
give different ideas.
I like it, but I think that we have the opportunity to get it right where they all got a little bit right. We can benefit from all of the different municipalities and taking snippets from them.
Agreed, and just to clarify, so it seems like you're in favor of allowing shell to count towards landscaping. You mentioned native landscaping, which also is in our comp plan. We already, in our tree section, prioritize native trees. Would you feel like that's enough, or would you also want us to require like shrubs if they're only doing shell, or would you think shell with just the required trees would be enough to meet the
Can you
landscape?
do it or? So what if I have a yard and I want to put all shell and 3 trees? Or I have a yard and I want to do all shell and 6 shrubs? Or whatever, can it be an either or?
So,
Or what if I want to do all shell and I don't want to put any shrubs or trees?
so the tree requirement the way it's written, which is pretty consistent with all the other municipalities I looked at, wouldn't allow you to substitute trees for shrubs.
Okay.
So that wouldn't really be usual. We can explore that language if you wanted to look at it.
I don't want to be inconsistent with someone else. I mean, I understand that when you own a property, if you take down a tree, there's a requirement for what has to go back. You have to have so many, the landscaping is so many trees per whatever. So I understand that. I don't want to change that. I would not be opposed, though, to having the shell count towards landscaping, because it can be, and there are a lot of yards in our town that have a lot of shell.
Right.
And it stays.
So possibly an option could be we can allow turf that meets the required criteria to count, shell and stone to count without needing any additional shrubs. And then we can explicitly not count mulch as counting towards landscape. So if we put that in there, they would be able to still have mulch if it's above the 25%.
Yeah. Would that make it a better process for you in closing out a permit? Does that fix the issue that you have with these permits that are open?
Yeah, honestly, that makes it like as easy as possible on both the city and the applicant, because it's also the less restrictive. If we're not requiring any shrubs, just the tree requirement, and then shell. It makes it
I mean,
easy.
because the reality is if you have to put in 5 shrubs and you put them in and I don't really want them there, once I get my CO, I'm going to dig them up and pass them down the road anyhow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
All right, so I have.
Making it difficult on Public Works.
I have some questions. So when we speak residential, are we speaking single-family or multifamily and single-family?
That's a good question, because typically in our land development code, it defines residential as usually, it really depends on the section of the code, but in the landscaping code, it's specifically 106-33, it specifically says single-family, duplex, and triplex, and then proposing to add in that it's single-family attached or detached, so if it's a townhome, that would fall under the residential.
So if we're looking at a single-family, I would look at the code a little bit differently than if I were looking at multifamily. And open space, when you talk about open space, 25%, that means partially it includes buffer, right? So you have certain buffer around the property, whether it's 5 feet, whether it's 7.5, 10 feet, or whatever. So I personally would say that obviously the green space or the open space needs to be treated. You can't just let it be dirt by itself. So there are different levels of treatment, whether it's grass, whether it's turf, whether it's shell, whatever it is that we're describing. But we also need to be cognizant of having to be able to put trees there and shrubs, especially if it's multifamily. So I would say, the treatment of the land, which is turf or whatever, should be different than having to put landscaping. Landscaping would include shrubs and trees. So that's what I would say. And I would say really no turf in right-of-way. The right-of-way belongs to whether it's the city or DOT. I mean, that's all it is. And it becomes liability to us. So I personally would say no turf, no astroturf in the right-of-way. It could require maintenance. Somebody could trip over it. It could create some safety concerns. And looking at that visibility triangle, did you say that's down to like 15 feet? You wanted to reduce it from?
So the proposed change is to keep it at 25 feet for all intersections, all public intersections. We don't have anything about driveways, but reducing it to 15 feet if it's an alley, which an alley is defined as, I believe, a right-of-way of less than like 15 feet or something. I could get you the exact measurement, but it's smaller streets.
So, but what I'm seeing here is the visibility triangle starts at the edge of pavement, not necessarily the property line / right-of-way lane.
Correct, and that's usually how, in my research, that's how most cities do it, because the property line can be different from parcel to parcel. Sometimes the property line is right at the curb, sometimes we have more right-of-way and it's significantly in.
Okay, I mean, I wouldn't have any problem with that, but typically it's a right-of-way line that they use a visibility triangle, and I understand it's more practical to use the edge of pavement, and they can't do any shrubs in a right-of-way.
They can as long as it's under the 36 inches.
36 is still a little bit too high if you were trying to look over them. I would say maybe 24-inch or 30-inch. But
So, yeah.
typically in a right-of-way, they should not really do anything but sod.
Gotcha. So I'll let you guys discuss the turf in the right-of-way again, but just to touch on the shrubs, right now, we kept 36 inches because that's what we had. Other municipalities also have 36 inches, but that is on the higher end. It's usually somewhere, for my research, between 24 inches and 36 inches. So we can look at lowering that to 24.
24 maybe too low.
Maybe 30 is also pretty consistent with, I would say 30 is the average of what I've seen from my research of other municipalities. So
30 is good.
Okay. And then just to also talk on you had mentioned the maintenance requirement. I just want to highlight that we do have a section of our code that we're proposing to add to about that the landscaping has to be maintained based on whatever type of landscaping, including xeriscape. And then to go back to your original point on differentiating between multifamily and single family, we do that, and the 25% is specific to single family, duplex, and triplex. Anything else, so multifamily or commercial, would have to meet, it's a 10% requirement, but they also have the landscape buffer, which you talked about, and that's generally 5 feet, and a lot of times it requires shrubs for visibility. So one thing we can do is we can change the general landscape requirement to allow shell and turf like we discussed for the 25% for residential and maybe the 10% for multifamily and commercial, but still require the landscape buffers to be vegetative. That's an option.
Okay, good. And one other thing, there is no such thing as pervious pavers when it comes to landscaping. I can understand drainage, but
Yeah, we don't credit pervious pavers for landscaping.
I just want to clarify that.
So just to circle back, where it seems like the feedback we're getting in terms of the right-of-way, we can either prohibit it kind of how we have it now, or we can maybe add some language to require, while it's permitted, maybe some kind of notarized document. Maybe we can even require it to get recorded with the clerk of court, that the owner and future owners are aware that they're responsible.
What about your irrigation requirements? Do you have any?
We don't really regulate. You don't need a permit to do irrigation. Really, just the maintenance section that would fall under it. You have to, based on the type
How
of
do they
landscape.
water the shrubs? Just hose bib?
We wouldn't really regulate as long as it's being maintained. If we drive past a property and it's doesn't meet the intent of the code, then the code is strong enough to require that they have to either irrigate it, or if they don't need an irrigation system and they can maintain it like that, that would be sufficient. But we don't require irrigation systems. We just require that it has to be properly maintained, however the property owner deems necessary.
All right, thank you.
Do you feel like you have a good directive from that conversation from all of us? Now,
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
This will go to the Planning Commission and then come back to us?
Correct.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is Resolution 2026-06, Moratorium on Collection of Mobility Fee and Kimley Horn Impact Fee Evaluation.
Thank you. So this is basically a two-part item. One was the resolution for the moratorium on collection of mobility fee. It was about to expire, the one that was adopted last year, so we needed to bring a new one to continue that moratorium. And then also a couple weeks ago, we received the Kimley Horn impact fee evaluation that they reviewed ours and the county's, and it had some recommendations with it. So the purpose of this memo is to recommend continuing the one-year moratorium on the collection of the city's local mobility impact fees. This action is necessary to finish evaluating the relationship between the city's local mobility impact fee and Pinellas County's multimodal impact fee, and to determine whether current practices may result in impermissible double charging for the same transportation capacity impacts. The Save Madeira Beach, up until the moratorium, imposed a local mobility impact fee on new development to help offset the cost of transportation infrastructure improvements necessitated by growth. Pinellas County also imposes a countywide multimodal impact fee under Chapter 150, Article 2 of the County Land Development Code. Per Florida Statute 163.31 805J, a developer may not be charged twice for the same transportation impact. With the execution of an interlocal agreement between the city and the county to coordinate the administration of the county's multimodal impact fee, it is critical to evaluate whether the continued collection of the city's local mobility impact fee results in an overlapping charge. City staff recently received and reviewed the Kimley-Horn Impact Fee Evaluation Memo, and it's attached to the agenda packet. The memo recommended the city discontinue its mobility fee and continue to collect and administer only the county's transportation impact fees. City staff would like to discuss the results of the evaluation and get direction from the board for the next steps. City staff recommends continuing the 12-month moratorium on the collection of the city's local mobility impact fee until such time that the land development regulation updates can be addressed and potential impact to the comprehensive plan can be reviewed. During this time, no local mobility impact fees would be assessed or collected for new development or redevelopment. We'd still continue to collect the counties because we signed that interlocal agreement to collect it. While there will be a temporary pause in collection of the city's local mobility impact fees, the city will retain 50% of the county's multimodal impact fees per the interlocal agreement. This will help mitigate the fiscal impact of the moratorium and provide continued funding for eligible transportation improvements during the review period. Staff recommends approving Resolution 2026-06, which would continue the one-year moratorium on the collection of the city's local mobility impact fee effective upon adoption until July 31st, 2027, unless the Board of Commissioners rescind or extend the moratorium by subsequent resolution. And attached is the resolution, which, if supported by it, would be going to the Planning Commission in July and then back to the board for a vote. And then the Kimley-Horn Impact Fee Evaluation Memo is on there. It got shifted in front of my memo, but it's in the packet. And I'm happy to leave it up to discussion now.
Any public comment? Commission, any questions or comments?
I have, Andrew, does the Kimley-Horn recommendation, it looks like it's different from the staff recommendation.
No, it's the same. We support removing our local one and continuing to administer the counties. That's what their conclusion. And
Okay,
we
so it's the
support
same, because it says staff recommendation continue the one-year.
moratorium.
Okay.
Because we need time to undo our local
So,
one.
yeah,
because it takes time.
since you all agree, I'm in favor of that.
Yeah.
Is this consistent with Pinellas County?
Yes, yes. I mean, we signed the interlocal agreement to continue to administer theirs, and removing it would make sure we stay in compliance. And also, even still, I just wanted to show this. Kimley-Horn did a comparison about collecting ours versus theirs, and it benefits homeowners and residential properties where the fees would be less, while we would still be charging more for commercial, which has a larger impact, because theirs is based on use and density, while ours was per heated square foot. So this would, by moving ours, would also be beneficial. And then with the counties, with the residential one, they only charge if you go, they have different thresholds of residential square footage. So if the house is the same size, it wouldn't be a charge. It's usually if the house, let's say it went from like a square footage increase, because it went from like a one-story house at grade to a two-story over parking. But I'd have to pull up the exact threshold that would be at. But it would bring us into compliance and make sure we continue to be.
Any additional comments? So this is just a continuation of what we've already approved in the past?
The resolution would be
Yes.
yes, but staff needs time to review and see what would need to be done to remove our local one, because that will take time to look through our comp plan and LDRs to figure out and we'd be coming back to talk about what it would take to redo it. Would you want Kimley-Horn to come in and present their memo? We got to kind of, I wanted to at least bring it to you guys because we got it not close to the cutoff, but enough where I wanted to at least make sure you got it now. But would you want me to have them try to see if they can come back next month to present it?
Did we pay them to come and present? Is that part of their contract?
I would have to double check
So
that.
Andrew, just for clarification, we put a pause on this because of the recommendation or information from the county. So we're just here today talking about continuing that pause and putting it in a resolution to vote on, correct?
Yeah, another resolution.
So I agree with the resolution of continuation.
Yeah.
Is this for existing residents as opposed to new people purchasing? So if a new person comes in, buys a property, are they exempt from those impact fees?
This is new construction, and with the counties, it's based on use. So, I mean, if someone builds a house and it's doesn't hit that square footage threshold, then it wouldn't be charged. But for something like someone tearing down a commercial building and building a hotel, obviously, like the hotel would have a larger impact, so they have to pay and the county, I could next time around attach the county's impact fees to show how what they charge based on what use, and because I don't have it attached to this memo right now. They did it. Kimberly Horn did include an example though, so they do have the shopping center and what it's charged per 1,000 square feet versus how with the residential that's charged per dwelling unit at that square footage threshold. So they did do an example using the counties in it.
We stopped paying this because we got something from the county that said, or collecting it, because we got something from the county that said, you shouldn't be collecting this, you're collecting it for the county. So that's what we're just not collecting a portion of impact fees because the county collects that portion and it would be being collected twice. And they did a study for us on it. So all we're doing is voting to continue that, not collecting that impact fee until they get all done and they bring it back to us again.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Simplified it I knew that's the way I would understand it. I knew that's the way Chuck would understand it. So next on the agenda is Florida Legislative Update, Community Development Department. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Give me 1 second here. So, wanted to briefly go over some of the legislative updates that have a direct kind of impact on Community Development Department. I've put together some of the ones that are the most impactful. This is not designed to be fully encompassing of all legislative updates that impact us. There's some of them that may not have impacts, but may require maybe some verbiage added to our LDRs. So we'll be going through that. And I'll be honest with you, these are impactful such that I will not have all the answers to how we're going to address these. Some of these things come live July 1st, so we will have some questions for city attorney. But I kind of wanted to briefly touch on the impactful ones. I pulled up the summary from the legislative website, and what I've done is I've made staff comments, and this is what was handed out to you guys on the dais before the meeting started. So the summary is provided, and then in red is staff comments. And these are very much just a conscious thought as I'm looking at these of stuff that we're going to definitely need some clarification on and that you need to understand is coming down the pipeline. So with House Bill 803, it's regarding building permits and inspections. And this amends provisions related to the Florida Building Code, building permit requirements, and requirements related to inspections and private providers. And it goes through it gives you a brief summary. For our part with the staff thing, provides exemptions from flood barriers and walls. So this is for residential structures. That's kind of an interesting one. We're going to really digest how we're going to address that because when they inserted the walls, that's a little concerning. So we want to make sure we provide clear guidance to the public about what that really means. So we'll be preparing some action items related to this. It definitely impacts our permit fee calculation. Right now, we currently do that based on the cost of the project. So when you submit your permit, you tell us you're building $1 million home. we charge you 1% of that. It used to be 2%. So remember that as you're going through budgeting. Our permit fees used to be 2%, and now they're 1%. So that's something to keep in mind, too, as you see those numbers. So we're going to have to review the project cost. There is an option in ICC, the International Code, to allow for how to calculate permits. So we'll be reviewing that and trying to kind of gut check that against what we think the permit fee should be. So we'll be reviewing that. This touches permit acceptance, review, and approval turnaround times. It's also requiring us to make sure that our website has all of the permit applications on there, as long as a list of the required documents. And we do have really good checklists on there, but we will be revisiting everything to make sure it's, you know, it's coming across and they're cohesive from application to application. It also impacts our private provider fee reduction process. It expands options for private providers that, by using a private provider, you remove municipal reviews and inspections possibly. So for those of you who don't know, you can use a private provider to review the plans for building code compliance. And then you can also use a private provider to serve as the building inspector throughout the project. If you do those, you get a reduction in your permit fee. So we would calculate your permit fee, and if you did plan review, you get a 25% reduction. If you do plan review and the building inspection, then it has to be a 50% reduction. So this allows for the use of private providers, and it also puts more of a time restriction on us once we get those, and that can kind of be a little difficult as well. It expands the options for private providers, and when using a private provider, there's a 10-day requirement for completed and sufficient review. When you use a private provider, they're specifically doing the Florida Building Code. They're not comparing it to our local ordinances, our floodplain, our base flood elevation, none of that. That's where a lot of the complication comes in when we receive these single-family homes. It may have been reviewed for compliance with the Florida Building Code, but often they're not even in the ballpark on our local ordinances. So we try to educate the private providers that the permit is not complete and sufficient until such time as it is past engineering review, public works if necessary, planning and zoning, floodplain. Only once it's past all those is it complete and sufficient for the building officials' time clock to start and to turn it around in 10 days. That's going to require some education. That's going to require a lot more front-end work, honestly, for staff, and a little more critical review of the incoming permits. So we will need to provide clear definition on what we consider a complete and sufficient permit to be. We get a lot of, not all engineers are created equal, not all architects are created equal. So we get a broad range of permit submittals from really good to they literally never even knew what community they were designing for and just put it back to us to figure it out. So with that, we will need to create, in order for us to double check a private provider's work, we have to have an audit process. So we're going to have to create an audit process. That way, when we do check a private provider work, we have something in place and documented, and we follow it every time. So that'll also be something that we're going to have to start working on. One of the things the House bill did is it did put some responsibility in the Florida the Florida Building Commission, to create a uniform commercial and residential permit application. That, to my knowledge, has not been drafted yet, but I do understand they're working on it. So that should be forthcoming as well. There's a qualification in here for work that is less than $15,000. That requires we turn that around in 5 days. So once it's complete and sufficient and comes in, we have to turn that around in 5 days if it's valued under 15 grand. So I foresee a lot of permits that are $14,999 coming in. So that's also gonna put another strain on the intake process now. And things we'll need clarification on, just as an example, if you are a private provider and you are doing the inspections, but your silt fence is down, do we still have the right to put a stop work order on that project? Or should the private provider also be doing those things? So we will put together a list of questions to get with Tom on, and it may be something that we have to, run up the flagpole to get some answers for as well, clarification. So it added flexibility post-disaster to allow for qualified individuals to assist with building inspections. This is really actually a good thing out of the bill because it will provide you the ability if, for instance, you've been a plumber for 20 years, you own your own business, we could then technically That's how I'm interpreting it. I will confirm. But it does read to me like you would be able to leverage other experts in the area that you wouldn't normally do if it weren't for the post-disaster. So I feel like it opens up the workforce a little more for us to be able to use qualified people in that capacity. And again, the floodplain regulations and our planning and zoning regulations are still applicable. So House Bill 803 does not touch those. This is mainly geared towards the building code stuff. Any particular questions on that, or do you want me to go through all of them first? One at a time may be better.
So Marcy, I have a question. Did you have I have a question. So when you use a private provider and they don't have to pay for us to do the inspections because they're paying their private provider to do those inspections, we still do a floodplain inspection, correct?
Correct.
So do we have a provision in our fee schedule to charge for that specific inspection?
So that's the other thing we're going to do is revisit our fee schedule and how it's worded to make sure that the inspections that still will be required are clearly identified.
Yeah.
And because we are actually still issuing the permit, we will have those inspections on there with that process.
So we can go through our fee schedule and look to capture all of the costs that would still be associated for the city, even though we're not the on-site inspector. They can sign off on it, but we could still charge a fee for issuing the permit or for those types of things?
Yes, for fees that are still applicable and not impacted by this, we'll definitely make sure. So that's been kind of one of the audit processes. And honestly, since I've sat in this position, we have been trying to better follow some of the fee schedules that we do have now that we are set up a little better, and having the system, the permit software system we have also lends itself to better tracking of those types of fees.
So do you see going through the fee schedule to try, once you get all your questions answered, obviously, do you see going through the fee schedule and being able to make those recommended adds and adjustments as something that you can do sooner than later so that you're not missing out on your, on being paid for the services that you're providing?
Yeah, so and we're on a time clock for when this legislation, a lot of it goes into effect July 1st. And so that's clarification that we're going to need from Tom as well. But yes, we were going to have to pretty quickly go through our fee schedule, establish how we're going to do the permit process. And that also means how we're charging it. We have to go and now fix our permit software to calculate like that.
Calculate it.
So it's a pretty heavy lift. And maybe Tom can weigh in on this, but I spoke with our building official, and she had recently went to a meeting like literally in the last 2 weeks, and had asked other municipalities how they were coming along with getting these efforts in place. And everybody's kind of where we're at right now. So nobody really is any further along. Maybe communities who already calculated their permit fees differently, but for the most part, everybody's in the same boat. And the general sense that she had when she left there, and this is what I would kind of look to Tom to clarify, is provided we are actively in the process of trying to make all these adjustments, we're in compliance, but maybe Tom can address really what this means when the July 1st clock hits.
So obviously, nobody knows. But I agree with Marcy. So long as we're making a good faith effort to make the required changes, I think that will go a long way. But we really don't know, what the state is going to do if we don't comply.
So, any other questions on 803?
Thank you, Marcy.
So now we'll go to, we have House Bill 399, which is land use and development regulations. This bill includes a variety of provisions related to land use and development regulations. So again, some of the highlights are listed here. Some things that the staff has looked again is this also impacts how our permit fees are calculated. In larger communities, a lot of times you get a site plan approved before you ever go and design your building. You meet with the community, you say, okay, here's where my house is going to be, here's my setbacks, here's my pool. Does all this look good? And then we would approve that, and then you would go to the building. Once you knew you could build that footprint, you would then go to get your building permit. And so that's why there is a fee associated with this permit plan review. And those are fees that we've always had in our fee schedule. We've just not been really optimizing those. So we are now capturing those. So this is also giving us guidance on how those permit values should be set up. So we're going to have to put some thought into that as well. As of right now, I don't have any particular guidance on the best way to do this like I was able to do with the building permit, but we'll look to some of our local communities to see what they're doing and follow that process. So we'll be bringing that as well. We will need to look for some updates to our comp plan and LDRs to address any incompatibility issues related to residential districts, and we may need to upgrade or update our language as far as manufactured home versus mobile homes. So to be clear, we do allow for manufactured homes that are built off-site and then delivered and put on the site, but it still has to meet, it's typically certified by the Florida Building Commission or the DBPR. They rate them for wind tolerance and compliance with the Florida Building Code. So they come rated to be here. Then they also adhere to the planning and zoning code. So they still have to meet setbacks, height, and all that other stuff, but they are built off-site and then delivered here. So that's what they're referring to. So there could be some changes coming with that, mainly just, like I said, the permit cost is going to be the main one, and then just updating any language we would have. Questions on that? So 927, local land planning and development. The bill requires counties and cities of a certain size to create and implement a program by January 1st, 2027 for the use of qualified, pre-approved private professionals from a local government-maintained registry to perform a pre-application review or permit applications, plan reviews, plat approvals before submission to local government for final approval. The mechanics of this review, as supplementing the local government staff resources, are to be determined by the governing body. Some of staff's comments regarding this is must immediately establish a process for a pre-application consultation program with automatic approval when timelines are not met. Create a registry for approved consultants, or we must accept any qualifying consultant. If the applicant utilizes a consultant and submits a pre-application certification, we have 5 days to confirm receipt, verify completeness, and notify the applicant of any deficiencies. Then we have 45 days to review and approve, deny, or approve with conditions. There will be LDR updates for planning, referencing state statutes, and we'll also have to look at our townhouse plat updates as well. So this is giving them another avenue. It's almost like a private provider, but it's using a consultant. The applicant can go pay their own private consultant, and they would submit a pre-application certification, which is another document we'll have to look into drafting and getting prepared. But then again, that basically says that somebody has looked at our code, and in this case, they should be looking at setbacks. They should be looking at all those other components, and by the time it gets to us, they should have, with this pre-application, we should be a no-brainer to hopefully approve. But given our size, we don't have to create a registry of consultants. We can just accept qualifying consultants, and when I say qualifying, my assumption now is we would just confirm that they are licensed to the DBPR to be participating in the work that they're doing. So that's kind of how I foresee this going. And yeah, so that's going to be another avenue too by which people can use outside resources. House Bill 929, local government regulations for cheekies. Obviously, we did a pretty good job on our accessory structures, so I don't foresee this being a huge impact to us because it's relative to side yards and distances. We don't have large side yards, and we already really covered most of that within our accessory code. We'll just review it, make sure we don't need to add any additional verbiage to adhere to this, but I don't foresee this being a big issue. But if we do come across anything that we catch, we'll definitely be sure to let you guys know. But right now, I think it may just be some verbiage updates. Affordable housing, House Bill 1389. Again, it's here. We need to know it's here. Staff needs to understand it. But as far as any immediate impacts to us, I don't foresee any unless Tom maybe has any thoughts on it. But we're just kind of working to make sure we're knowledgeable of the requirements and that we don't have anything contradictory anywhere in our code. Last but not least, 1614, enforcement of the Florida Building Code. This bill removes a provision of current law authorizing a local government to use excess funds from enforcing the building code to pay for the construction of a building that houses a local government's building code enforcement agency. This one stings too. So this means like when we used excess funds previously to help build out downstairs and stuff like that, it's my understanding this now prevents us from using those funds to create housing for those officials. and for
So that
us.
essentially makes the building department not self-funded. I mean, no longer. If you can only use your money for the building department,
But not.
then that means you're only using your money for, I mean, that's interesting.
So,
Well, you better hurry up and build a new building
I can,
before January 1st.
again, this is the highlights. If we go through and find anything else of significance, we'll definitely share that with you guys. And maybe some of that will just be simply via the city manager's office to you guys to share any updates. But we definitely have our work cut out for us with this, and definitely Tom is probably going to be getting a lot of annoying questions from us. So be prepared.
Well, we have extra hours on him until October, so take advantage of them.
Duly noted.
Thank you very much, Marcy. So we had no public comment. That means it is 6:35 and we are adjourned.